The cabin materialized through fog like a hallucination born of desperation. Maya Thompson pressed one hand against the weathered timber frame, the other cradling the curve of her belly where 3 months of life grew beneath her ribs. The compass in her jacket pocket had cracked 2 days earlier, its needle spinning uselessly past magnetic north, past any reliable direction. Behind her, 18 days of wilderness stretched back toward a city she'd abandoned, toward a marriage that had shattered the moment David's voice had turned clinical, detached, final. The cabin's windows stared back, dark and hollow, but the structure stood. That alone felt like mercy. Inside smelled of decades. Dust particles performed their slow ballet through shafts of light that found gaps in boarded windows, illuminating cobwebs thick as curtains and the skeletal remains of furniture. A table listed to one side, its surface warped by humidity into waves. A cast-iron stove squatted in the corner, rust blooming across its belly like disease. Maya's boots left prints in the dust, the first human marks this space had known in years. She moved through the single room methodically, cataloging what remained. Shelves holding mason jars filmed with grime, a ladder ascending to a loft where something skittered away from her approach, the bones of a life someone had built and then abandoned, or died defending. The thought arrived unbidden, and with it came the memory of David's face 3 weeks ago, the careful blankness he'd worn like armor when he'd set the divorce papers on their dining room table. The apartment in Seattle had been filled with plants she'd collected during research expeditions, living testimonies to her expertise in botanical sciences. None of them had survived the week after he'd left. She'd watched them wither despite her care, as if they'd absorbed her grief through their roots. The pregnancy test had been positive 6 weeks before that dinner. She'd held it in their bathroom, sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked Puget Sound, and felt something she'd never experienced in 30 years of life: completeness. The tiny plus sign represented the future they'd discussed during their honeymoon in Bali, the garden David had promised. The children who would know the Latin names of every plant species she'd saved from extinction. She'd walked into their bedroom where David was reviewing architectural plans, the test stick still warm from her hand, and shown him without words. His face had frozen. The pause stretched long enough for her to understand that something fundamental had broken before she'd even known it was fragile. "We should talk," he'd said, and those 3 words had contained the entire divorce. The actual conversation had come later, after she'd prepared his favorite meal, after she'd tried to bridge the distance that had opened between them like a fault line. "I'm not ready for this," David had told her, his architect's hands folded on the table, not touching his food. "I thought I was, but I'm not." The affair had been going on for months, he'd admitted. A client, someone with whom he was building something that didn't include Maya or the future she'd imagined. His family had called within hours of his departure, his mother's voice sharp with accusation. "James wasn't ready for fatherhood. You should have been more careful." As if pregnancy were something Maya had orchestrated, a trap sprung on an unwilling man. The divorce papers arrived via messenger 3 days later, accompanied by demands from David's lawyer that Maya respond immediately, sign quickly, disappear quietly. She'd tried. For 72 hours, she'd attempted to inhabit the ruins of her life in Seattle, attending her position at the Botanical Research Institute, where colleagues suddenly couldn't meet her eyes. The apartment had become a museum of failures, every corner holding memories of promises David had made with apparent sincerity. The nursery plans he'd sketched on graph paper. The baby name book he'd brought home from a downtown bookstore. The genetic testing appointment he'd scheduled and then canceled. Maya had sat on their balcony on the 4th morning and watched the city wake up below, watched people move through lives that made sense, and understood with sudden clarity that staying would destroy whatever remained of her. The Botanical Institute granted her indefinite leave without questions. A real estate agent agreed to sublet the apartment. Maya withdrew her savings, purchased survival equipment from an outdoor outfitter with a clerk who'd raised eyebrows at her obvious pregnancy, and boarded a bus heading toward the mountains. The trailhead where the bus had dropped her marked the boundary of a conservation area that stretched for hundreds of square miles. Maya had walked into it with no destination, only the need to vanish. Her backpack held freeze-dried meals, a water filtration system, emergency medical supplies, and the cracked compass that would eventually betray her. The first week had passed in a blur of exhaustion and determination. She'd followed game trails, forded streams, camped beneath evergreens that blocked the worst of the rain. Her morning sickness had persisted despite the first trimester supposedly ending, making food difficult. But the wilderness asked nothing of her except survival. It didn't judge her choices or question her stability. It simply existed, indifferent and honest. By the second week, Maya's provisions had dwindled. She'd supplemented with berries she recognized from her botanical training, nettles that could be boiled into nutritious tea, water carefully filtered from clear streams. The compass had begun failing around day 15, its needle wobbling uncertainly whenever she checked her bearings. By day 17, she'd been completely lost, following only the sound of water in the dim instinct that downhill meant civilization eventually. Her body had changed noticeably even in those weeks. The curve of her abdomen had become pronounced enough that her balance shifted, making steep descents treacherous. At night, she'd lain in her tent, one hand on her stomach, feeling the subtle flutter of movement that reminded her she was carrying more than just herself through this wilderness. "It's just us now," she'd whispered to her unborn child, "but we'll be okay." The cabin had appeared on the 18th day, when Maya's water filtration tablets were nearly exhausted and her food had been reduced to a handful of emergency rations. She'd been following a creek, hoping it would lead to a road or at least a maintained trail, when the straight line of the roof line had caught her eye through the dense foliage. Human construction in the midst of organic chaos. She'd pushed through a wall of ferns and found herself in an overgrown clearing, the cabin squatting at its center like something that had grown from the earth itself. Weathered gray timber, a sagging porch, windows either boarded or broken. The door hung askew on rusted hinges, requiring her shoulder to force it open. But inside was dry. Inside was shelter. Inside meant she could stop running, at least long enough to figure out what came next. Now, in the fading afternoon light, Maya moved through her inspection of the space with methodical care. The floorboards groaned under her weight but held. She tested each step before committing, wary of rot that could send her crashing through to whatever lay beneath. Most of the floor seemed solid, years of dryness having preserved the wood better than the exterior suggested. Only in the far corner did she find soft spots that gave slightly under pressure. She marked those mentally and continued her survey. The loft ladder looked precarious, but when she climbed halfway up, she could see the space above held nothing but dust and what might have once been a mattress, now reduced to fabric tatters and mouse-eaten stuffing. She descended carefully, her growing center of gravity making the climb more dangerous than it would have been 4 months ago. The stove drew her attention next. Rust covered the caster, but the structure appeared intact. She opened the door and peered inside at ash piled thick as winter snow. The flue pipe disappeared into the ceiling, presumably connecting to a chimney. If she could clean it, if the pipe was clear, she'd have heat. She'd have the ability to boil water, cook food, survive a winter that would arrive eventually. The thought steadied her. This wasn't just shelter for a night. This could be something more. In the corner nearest the stove, Maya noticed something odd about the floorboards. One section didn't quite match the others, the grain running perpendicular, while the rest of the floor followed parallel lines. She knelt awkwardly, her pregnant belly making the position uncomfortable, and ran her fingers along the seam. It was barely visible, the kind of detail that would escape casual notice. But she'd spent years in laboratories examining specimens under magnification, training her eye to catch variations. This was deliberate. She pressed along the edge, searching for a mechanism. Nothing. She tried pulling upward. Still nothing. Finally, she pushed down hard on the opposite corner and heard a soft click. The section loosened, revealing a hidden compartment roughly 2 feet square. Inside, protected from the elements that had ravaged the rest of the cabin, sat a metal box. Maya extracted it with trembling hands, setting it on the warped table. No lock secured it, just a simple latch tarnished with age. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she opened it, half expecting emptiness or disappointment. Instead, she found treasure. A leather journal, its cover embossed with a flowering plant she recognized as native to this region. Several folders of yellowed papers, seed packets sealed in wax paper, their handwritten labels still legible. A collection of black and white photographs showing a slender woman with gray-streaked hair, usually kneeling beside plants, or working in what might have been the clearing outside. And beneath it all, a hand-drawn map of the cabin and its surroundings, remarkably detailed, with one notable addition: a large X marked in the southwest corner, precisely where Maya stood. But the X was positioned outside the cabin's drawn footprint, in a space that shouldn't exist. Maya lifted the journal with reverence. The first page bore an inscription in elegant handwriting: Catherine Wells, May 1980. The entry began, "I've finally done it. Left everything behind for this place of my own. Richard thinks I've lost my mind, abandoning a perfectly good teaching position to play mountain woman. Perhaps I have, but after 30 years in classrooms explaining the wonders of botany to disinterested students, I need to live among the plants I've studied all my life." Maya read on, her exhaustion forgotten. Catherine's story unfolded through meticulous entries: the purchase of abandoned mining company property, the restoration of this cabin from complete dereliction, the establishment of garden beds that still showed faint traces outside. But as Maya flipped through pages, searching for any clue about the mysterious X on the map, a loose envelope fell from between the journal's pages. Inside was a letter, the paper brittle with age. "If I die before I can tell anyone, let this be found. My father, Robert Wells, was a painter, not famous in his lifetime, but brilliant. He created 47 paintings in the decade before his death in 1962, each one a masterpiece of landscape work. They were his life's culmination, the synthesis of everything he'd learned about capturing light and shadow. He refused to sell them, despite pressure from collectors. After he died, I hid them. I was 25 years old, terrified and certain that his death had been no accident. Thomas Hartley, a wealthy developer, had been hounding my father to sell the paintings so he could resell them for profit. My father refused. 1 week later, he died in what was ruled a car accident. I couldn't prove murder, but I knew. So I hid the paintings where no one would find them, in the place where light never reaches beneath this cabin. I've kept them safe for 40 years, but I'm old now, and Marcus Hartley, Thomas's son, has found me. He knows the paintings exist. That's why he wants this land. If you found this, if you're reading these words, please, find the room where light never touches. Protect what my father created. Don't let Marcus win." Maya's hands shook as she set the letter down. 47 paintings by a potentially significant artist, hidden somewhere in or beneath this cabin, worth potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars, worth killing for, if Catherine's suspicions about her father's death were accurate. She examined the map again, studying the X that marked a spot that seemed impossible. The cabin had only one room. There was no southwest corner that corresponded with the marking. Unless... She moved to where the X would be located, stomping on the floorboards with more force. The sound changed as she reached the corner, taking on a hollow quality. There was space beneath, but how to access it? Maya got on her hands and knees again, ignoring the protest from her lower back, and examined the boards more carefully. Most were nailed solidly in place, but one section showed wear around the edges, as if it had been removed and replaced many times. She searched for a grip, found a small notch carved into one board and pulled. The section lifted away, revealing darkness below and the top of what looked like stone stairs descending into the earth. Before she could investigate further, the light changed. Maya looked up to see the sun had dropped behind the mountain ridge, plunging the clearing into premature dusk. She'd been so absorbed in Catherine's story that hours had passed without notice. Her stomach growled, reminding her she hadn't eaten since early morning. The underground space would have to wait. First, she needed to make this place habitable for the night. Maya worked methodically as darkness gathered. She cleared the worst of the debris from one corner, creating a clean space for her sleeping bag. Using water from her dwindling supply, she wiped down a section of table surface. From her backpack, she retrieved a freeze-dried meal, added hot water from her thermos, and ate mechanically while reading more of Catherine's journal by flashlight. The woman who emerged from these pages was remarkable, brilliant, determined, and ultimately hunted. Catherine had lived in this cabin for 15 years, from 1980 to 1995, when the entries abruptly stopped. What had happened then? Had Marcus finally succeeded in whatever campaign of harassment Catherine had documented? A sudden sound jolted Maya from her reading, scratching, coming from the loft. Her flashlight beam caught twin points of reflected light, amber eyes that watched her with animal stillness. Maya's heart raced, her mind conjuring images of bears or cougars. But the eyes were too small, too low to the ground. As she stared, frozen, the creature shifted, and she saw the distinctive mask marking of a raccoon. It chittered at her, annoyed by the intrusion into what it clearly considered its territory, then disappeared through a gap in the wall. Maya laughed shakily, the sound strange in the empty cabin. Just a raccoon. Not a threat. She was safe here. But was she? Catherine's letter suggested otherwise. Marcus Hartley wanted this land, wanted access to whatever treasures lay hidden beneath it. If he learned Maya was here, squatting in the cabin his family had been trying to acquire for decades, what would he do? The question haunted her as she unrolled her sleeping bag and tried to find a comfortable position on the hard floor. Outside, the forest came alive with nocturnal sounds, the hoot of an owl, the rustle of something moving through underbrush, the distant yipping of coyotes. Maya's hand rested on her belly, feeling the gentle flutter of her baby's movement. "We'll figure this out," she whispered into the darkness. "We have to." Sleep came fitfully, broken by discomfort and anxiety. Maya woke before dawn, her back aching from the hard floor, her bladder urgently demanding relief. She stumbled outside into the gray pre-dawn light and found a suitable spot behind a thick cluster of bushes. The morning air was cold enough to make her breath visible, a reminder that autumn was progressing toward winter. She'd need better shelter than a sleeping bag on bare floorboards. She'd need heat, food, a way to make this place genuinely livable. The tasks ahead felt overwhelming in the weak morning light. Back inside, Maya forced herself to eat an energy bar while reviewing Catherine's journal entries about cabin repairs. The woman had been meticulous in documenting her work, replacing rotten roof shingles, sealing window frames, clearing the chimney, winterizing the structure against mountain cold. Her notes included detailed instructions, as if Catherine had known someone might need this information someday. The roof leaks worst above the eastern window during heavy rain, she'd written. Individual shingle replacement only works temporarily. The support beam beneath has rotted and must be reinforced before proper repairs can hold. Maya climbed outside and circled the cabin, studying its condition with new understanding. The roof was indeed compromised, several shingles missing entirely, others cracked and curling. But the structure itself was sound, the walls plumb, the foundation solid. This wasn't beyond repair. She just needed tools, materials, and time. The clearing revealed other secrets in daylight, the remnants of garden beds, their wooden borders mostly rotted away but still visible in the layout. Raised mounds where Catherine had cultivated vegetables. The skeletal remains of what might have been a chicken coop. A rain barrel system, still partially intact. And beyond the clearing, a fast-moving stream that would provide fresh water. Maya was filling her bottles from the stream, adding purification tablets when she heard the engine. The sound was impossible in this roadless wilderness, yet unmistakable. A vehicle was approaching. She stood slowly, her heart hammering, and watched as a pickup truck emerged from the forest, following what must be an old logging road she hadn't noticed. The truck was expensive, four-wheel drive, painted a deep green. It stopped at the clearing's edge, and a man climbed out. He was middle-aged, perhaps 45, with the kind of expensive casual clothing that suggested wealth trying to appear outdoorsy. His boots were new, unstained by real use. His smile was practiced, professional, and didn't reach his eyes. "Well," he said, his voice carrying across the clearing, "I wasn't expecting to find anyone here, especially not—" His gaze dropped to Maya's pregnant belly, visible beneath her jacket. "Are you all right? This is pretty far from anywhere." Maya's instinct screamed danger, though she couldn't articulate why. Something about his predatory assessment of the situation, the way he looked at the cabin as if already counting money. "I'm fine," she said, keeping her voice steady. "Just camping." The man's smile widened, still cold. "Camping. In a condemned cabin on property that's about to change hands. I'm Marcus Hartley." He waited as if the name should mean something. When Maya didn't react, his smile thinned. I'm in the process of acquiring this land. It's been abandoned for years, you see. Legally abandoned, which means I can petition for ownership through adverse possession laws. Maya's mind raced, remembering Catherine's warnings. This was the man who'd harassed an elderly woman, possibly driven her to an early death, all for the treasure hidden beneath this cabin. I'm using it, she said. Doesn't that matter? Marcus laughed, the sound containing genuine amusement. A pregnant woman squatting in the woods? No offense, but that's not going to hold up in court. Look, I'll give you a week to clear out. Find somewhere safe to have that baby. But after that, I'm proceeding with demolition and development plans. He gestured at the clearing. This is going to be a high-end mountain retreat. 6 luxury cabins, spa facilities, the whole package. There's serious money here. What about Catherine Wells? Maya asked, unable to stop herself. She lived here for years. This was her home. Something flickered across Marcus's face, too quick to read, but unmistakably dark. Catherine died years ago, left no will, no heirs, no legal claim to maintain ownership. The county took possession, and now the county is selling to me. That's how the law works. He climbed back into his truck, started the engine. 1 week, he called through the open window. Be smart about this. Maya watched the truck disappear back into the forest, her legs shaking. This was worse than she'd imagined. Marcus knew about the cabin, had official channels working to acquire it, and saw her as nothing more than an inconvenient squatter. But he didn't know about the paintings. That was her only advantage. The day passed in a blur of activity. Maya forced herself to focus on immediate survival rather than spiraling into anxiety about Marcus's threat. Using techniques from Catherine's journal, she began clearing the chimney, fashioning a brush from pine branches to scrape away decades of creosote and bird nests. The work was filthy, coating her in black soot, but when she finally finished and lit a test fire in the stove, the smoke drew properly upward instead of backing into the cabin. Heat began radiating from the iron surface, transforming the interior from merely dry to genuinely warm. She boiled water from the stream, made tea from pine needles rich in vitamin C, and felt slightly more human. As afternoon shadows lengthened, Maya steeled herself to investigate the underground space. She retrieved her flashlight, checked that it still held charge, and approached the opening she'd discovered. The wooden cover lifted easily once she knew the trick, revealing stone stairs that descended about 10 feet into darkness. The stairs were worn smooth in the centers, evidence of frequent use. At the bottom, she could make out the edge of a wooden door. Her hand was on the ladder when she heard footsteps outside. Human footsteps, light and quick. Maya's pulse spiked with adrenaline, her mind immediately jumping to Marcus returning with reinforcements. She grabbed the kitchen knife she'd been using to open cans, feeling ridiculous, but desperate. The door creaked open. Maya raised the knife and found herself facing a child. The girl was perhaps 10 years old, with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail and golden brown skin that suggested indigenous heritage. She wore practical outdoor clothing and moved with the confidence of someone completely at home in the wilderness. When she saw the knife, her eyes widened, but she didn't flee. Instead, she raised her hands in a peaceful gesture and spoke in a clear, calm voice. I'm Lily Blackwood. My grandfather Tom was friends with Catherine. She told me if anyone ever came to live here, I should help them. Are you going to stay? Maya lowered the knife slowly, her heart still racing. You knew Catherine? Lily nodded, stepping fully inside the cabin. She looked around with familiar eyes, seeing past the decay to memories. She taught me about plants, how to find food in the forest, which ones heal and which ones hurt. She was my friend. The girl's voice wavered slightly on the last word. I was really sad when she died, but she told me someone would come. Someone who needed the cabin like she did. She made me promise to help. Maya sank onto the rickety chair, suddenly exhausted. When did she die, Catherine? 2 years ago. She got really sick, really fast. My grandfather found her. Lily's face was somber with the weight of adult grief carried in a child's frame. Marcus Hartley had been coming around a lot, yelling at her, trying to make her leave. Grandfather says the stress killed her. Your grandfather knew Catherine well? He helped her build things, fix the roof and stuff. He's really good at that. Lily moved closer, studying Maya with frank curiosity. You're going to have a baby. Yes. Where's the father? The directness of children. Maya felt tears prick her eyes but refused to let them fall. Gone, it's just me and the baby now. Lily nodded as if this made perfect sense. Catherine said sometimes people come to the woods because the regular world breaks them. She said the woods don't break people. They just show you what you're made of. The girl moved to the window, peering out at the clearing. Marcus is bad. He wants to tear this place down. Catherine hid something from him. Something important. She wouldn't tell me exactly what, but she said it was buried where the light doesn't touch. Do you know what that means? Maya thought of the underground room, the letter about paintings, the X on the map. Maybe I'm starting to understand. I can help you, Lily said, turning back with an intensity that belied her age. I know the forest. I know where to find food, how to read the weather. My grandfather can help too, once I tell him about you. Catherine trusted him with everything. You can trust him too. Before Maya could respond, the air pressure changed. That was the only way to describe it. A sudden heaviness that made her ears pop. Lily's head snapped toward the door. Storm coming, she said. A big one. You need to prepare. Do you have enough water stored? The stream will flood. Maya looked at her single water bottle and felt panic rise. No, I don't have. Come on. Lily was already moving, pulling Maya toward the door with surprising strength. We'll fill everything you have. Then we need to make sure the roof won't leak too bad. Hurry. For the next 2 hours, Maya followed Lily's instructions, too grateful for the help to question it. They filled every container in the cabin from the stream, hauled them back, and positioned them strategically. Lily climbed the roof with the fearlessness of youth, showing Maya where the worst gaps were. Using a tarp from Maya's camping supplies and rocks to weight it down, they created a crude but functional patch. By the time they finished, the first drops were beginning to fall, fat and cold. I have to go, Lily said. Grandfather will worry, but I'll come back tomorrow if the storm passes. Don't be scared tonight. The cabin has survived worse. She paused at the door. Oh, and Maya, that's your name, right? I heard Marcus say it, but Maya, Catherine's room, the buried one. It has another entrance, through the outside near the big cedar tree, in case you need to get out fast, or in case someone comes in the regular way you don't want to meet. And then the girl was gone, disappearing into the gathering storm with the ease of a forest creature. The storm hit with ferocious intensity. Rain hammered the roof, finding the gaps their makeshift patch couldn't cover. Water dripped in 3 places, requiring Maya to constantly empty buckets. The wind screamed around the cabin's corners, making the structure groan and shift. Thunder cracked so close it rattled the windows, and lightning illuminated the interior in strobing flashes. Maya sat wrapped in her sleeping bag, Catherine's journal open on her lap, trying to distract herself from the violence outside by reading the woman's accounts of previous storms. Around midnight, during a brief lull, Maya heard something else. Not thunder, not wind, but a rhythmic pounding beneath the floorboards. Water, she realized. The underground room was flooding. If Catherine's paintings were down there, stored for 40 years, in presumably dry conditions, water could destroy them in hours. She couldn't let that happen. This was her leverage, her only card to play against Marcus's legal maneuvering. Maya lifted the floor section and shone her flashlight down. The stone stairs were slick with water, a thin stream running down them from cracks in the foundation. She couldn't see the bottom clearly, but she could hear water sloshing. Making a decision that felt both brave and insane, she began descending. The stairs were treacherous, each step requiring careful balance with her altered center of gravity. Halfway down, her foot slipped. She caught herself on the rough stone wall, scraping her palm badly enough to draw blood. But she continued. At the bottom, the door stood slightly ajar. Maya pushed it open and found herself in a room about 12 feet square, carved directly into the bedrock beneath the cabin. The walls were lined with wooden shelves, currently empty. But against the far wall, covered with multiple layers of canvas tarp, were rectangular shapes. Paintings, dozens of them. And beneath them, water was beginning to pool, seeping through cracks where the stone met the earth. Maya worked frantically, dragging the paintings away from the wall, stacking them in the driest corner she could find. There were 47, just as Catherine's letter had promised. Each one was substantial, likely 2 or 3 feet across, wrapped carefully in protective coverings that had held for decades but were now threatened by this single night's deluge. She couldn't bring them all upstairs. There wasn't room, and she couldn't manage the weight in her condition, but she could move them out of immediate danger. By the time she finished, her clothes were soaked and her body trembling with exhaustion. She climbed back up the stairs, replaced the floor covering, and collapsed onto her sleeping bag. Outside, the storm raged on, but Maya felt a fierce satisfaction. She'd done it. She'd protected Catherine's legacy for one more night. Tomorrow she'd figure out the next step. The morning arrived gray and dripping. Maya woke to silence, the storm having passed while she slept. Every muscle ached, her scraped palm throbbed, and she was colder than she'd been since arriving. But she was alive, and so was the baby, and the cabin still stood. She built up the fire in the stove, boiled water for instant oatmeal, and assessed the damage. The roof had held better than expected. The floor was wet but not flooded. The underground room would need time to dry, but the paintings were safe. As she ate, Maya heard a new sound, footsteps approaching. Heavier than Lily's, accompanied by the distinctive tap of a walking stick on stone. She tensed, hand moving toward her knife, but then Lily's voice called out, "Maya, it's me. I brought my grandfather." The man who entered with Lily was perhaps 70, with weathered brown skin and silver hair pulled back in a long braid. He carried himself with the quiet dignity of someone who'd spent a lifetime earning respect rather than demanding it. His eyes were sharp and assessing, taking in Maya's disheveled appearance, the cabin's condition, and making calculations. "Tom Blackwood," he said, his voice deep and measured. "Lily tells me you're planning to stay." "If I can." Tom nodded slowly. "Catherine was my friend. For 15 years, I helped her maintain this place. I knew what she was protecting, though she never showed me. When she died," he paused, something like grief crossing his features. "Marcus Hartley killed her. Not with his hands, but with his harassment, his threats, his relentless pressure. I found her collapsed into the garden. By the time I got her to a hospital, it was too late. Heart failure, they said, brought on by stress. Grandfather thinks Marcus should be in jail," Lily added matter-of-factly. "But there's no proof." "What are you here for?" Maya asked Tom, too tired for diplomatic dancing. "Are you going to tell me to leave too?" Tom's expression softened slightly. "No, I came to see if Lily was right, if you're really going to fight for this place. Because if you are, you'll need help. Catherine's dream was that someone would continue what she started, would keep the land safe from people like Marcus. Are you that person?" Maya thought of David's betrayal, the life she'd fled, the baby growing inside her who needed stability and protection. She thought of Catherine's letter, the paintings beneath her foot worth a fortune but meaning something more. She thought of the cabin that had sheltered her when she'd had nowhere else to go. "Yes," she said, "I'm going to stay. I'm going to fight." Tom's face broke into the first smile she'd seen from him. "Then we have work to do." Back đầu, sau khi Tom nói "then we have work to do", khám phá tranh plus xung đột với Marcus, chuẩn bị sinh nở với Rose, kịp kết thúc bão sắp đến. Osama Aish, Mayan, 19 tháng thai, ready to give birth. 6,600 từ mẹ đã. The work began at dawn. Tom returned with tools Maya had never seen, hand-forged implements Catherine must have used, their handles worn smooth by decades of grip. They started with the underground room, which had dried considerably since the storm, but still held moisture in its stone corners. Tom descended first, his movements careful on the worn stairs, and spent an hour examining the space with the thoroughness of an engineer. When he emerged, his assessment was characteristically blunt. Structurally sound, Catherine knew what she was doing when she carved this. But we need to move those paintings before another storm floods it again. They worked through the morning, Tom and Maya forming a careful rhythm. He'd hand paintings up from below, she'd receive them at the top, and together they'd carry each wrapped canvas to the cabin's driest corner. 47 trips up and down those stone stairs. By noon, Maya's back ached and her swollen ankles protested, but every painting was safe. Tom unwrapped one to verify Catherine's claims, a landscape of the very mountains surrounding them. rendered in oils that captured light with an intensity that made the painted sky seem more real than the actual clouds visible through the cabin window. In the corner, a signature, Robert Wells, 1958. My grandmother spoke of him, Tom said quietly, studying the painting. A white man who painted our land without stealing it, who saw what was there instead of what he wanted to see. Catherine said he'd refused to sell because collectors wanted to own the mountains, not honor them. He rewrapped the canvas carefully. Worth keeping safe, worth fighting for. Lily arrived mid-afternoon with her grandfather's lunch and news that made Maya's stomach clench. Marcus Hartley had been at the county offices that morning, filing additional paperwork. The clerk who'd told Lily's teacher didn't know specifics, but the urgency suggested Marcus was accelerating his timeline. Tom's expression darkened. He knows you're here, knows you're not leaving. He'll escalate before he gives up. Let him try, Maya said, the words coming out harder than she'd intended. Her hand found her belly, where the baby kicked with increasing vigor. 5 months until birth. 5 months to secure her position, to transform from squatter to legitimate resident, to build defenses against men like Marcus, who saw land as commodity rather than home. Rose Blackwood appeared that evening, summoned by Lily, but arriving with the air of someone who'd been planning the visit anyway. She was Tom's wife, Maya learned, though their relationship seemed to exist on a plane beyond conventional marriage. Two people who'd chosen each other daily for 40 years and counting. Rose moved through the cabin with proprietary efficiency, opening cupboards, checking supplies, assessing Maya's living conditions with eyes that missed nothing. "You're what, 4 months along?" Rose asked, though her tone suggested she already knew. "Almost 4.5. Rose placed both hands on Maya's abdomen, pressing firmly enough to map the baby's position through layers of skin and muscle. Her fingers moved with practiced confidence, finding the curve of the infant's spine, the hard roundness of its skull. "Head up still. Normal this early. Baby will turn when it's ready." She stepped back, nodding approval at something only she understood. "You're healthy, strong. The wilderness agrees with you better than that city did." Maya hadn't mentioned Seattle, but Rose had clearly heard the story from Tom or Lily. She didn't ask about David, didn't probe the wound that was still too fresh to examine. Instead, she pulled supplies from her bag, bundles of dried herbs, glass jars of tinctures, a worn notebook filled with handwritten recipes. Raspberry leaf tea, 3 cups daily starting at 6 months. Strengthens the uterus. Nettles for iron, your blood will need building. And this, she held up a jar of dark liquid, is shepherd's purse. For after birth, if bleeding is heavy, pray you don't need it, but have it ready. The lessons began that night and continued over the following weeks. Rose visited every few days, each time bringing new knowledge. The stages of labor, the signs of complications, the delicate balance between trusting the body and recognizing when intervention was necessary. She taught Maya positions for managing pain, breathing patterns that could slow or accelerate labor, the specific pressure points that might ease back pain or stimulate contractions. And she taught her about birth alone, because weather or distance might make Rose's presence impossible, and Maya needed to know she could survive that scenario. "Most births are straightforward," Rose explained during one lesson, her hands demonstrating on a cloth doll how to guide an emerging infant. "The woman does the work. The attendant just catches. But complications happen. Cord around the neck, you slip it over the head if loose, cut it immediately if tight. Shoulder dystocia, you change positions, try hands and knees. Hemorrhage, you massage the uterus, give shepherd's purse, and pray." She met Maya's eyes directly. "And if the baby doesn't breathe, you clear its airway and breathe into its mouth until it does. You understand? You might have to save your own child's life." The weight of that possibility sat heavy on Maya's chest for days. She practiced the techniques Rose taught until her hands knew them by instinct, until she could recite the steps half asleep. At night, lying in bed with the baby turning somersaults inside her, she whispered to her unborn child, "You're going to be okay. We're going to be okay. Whatever happens, we'll figure it out together." The cabin transformed around her as spring progressed toward summer. Tom repaired the worst damage, replaced rotten floorboards, reinforced the loft ladder, sealed window frames against drafts. He brought lumber salvaged from a collapsed shed on his property, nails straightened from previous uses, hinges cleaned and re-oiled until they moved smoothly. His work was precise, economical, built to last. Catherine deserved better than what Marcus put her through, he said once, driving nails with steady strikes. Least I can do is make sure her cabin outlives him. Lily became Maya's constant companion, arriving most mornings with food her grandparents sent and staying until evening. The girl possessed knowledge that made Maya's botanical expertise seem abstract by comparison. Lily knew which plants produced edible roots in spring, which flowers could be dried for winter tea, which mushrooms were safe and which would kill you before sunset. She taught Maya to read the forest's signs, the way birds fell silent before storms, how animal tracks told stories of the night's dramas, where to find clay suitable for pottery or medicine. They worked the garden together, clearing Catherine's old beds and preparing soil for planting. Lily had seeds saved from the previous year, beans and squash, carrots and potatoes, herbs Catherine had cultivated. Grammy says a garden is insurance, Lily explained, marking rows with string tied between stakes. You can't eat money, and stores are 2 hours away. This land feeds you if you let it. By Maya's 6th month of pregnancy, the garden showed green shoots and carefully tended rows. She'd learned to identify dozens of edible plants in the surrounding forest, to set snares for rabbits, to fish the creek with hooks Tom had fashioned from wire. Her body had changed beyond the obvious pregnancy. Muscles had developed in her arms and legs from hauling water and splitting firewood. Her hands had calloused. Her skin had bronzed from constant sun exposure. When she caught her reflection in the cabin's single small mirror, she barely recognized the woman looking back. The soft botanical researcher from Seattle had been replaced by someone leaner, harder, more capable. Jack Morrison became a regular visitor, arriving every week or two with supplies and news. He'd filed the conservation easement application through proper channels, but bureaucracy moved slowly. The review process could take 6 months, possibly longer. Meanwhile, he worked other angles, documenting the historical significance of Catherine's occupation, photographing the cabin's improvements, building a case that Maya represented continuity of stewardship rather than illegal squatting. Marcus filed for adverse possession, Jack reported during one visit, spreading legal documents across the cabin's table. Claims the land has been abandoned for 2 years since Catherine's death, that he's invested resources in preparation for development, that he has rights under state law. He tapped a specific paragraph. But his claim has weaknesses. Catherine paid property taxes until she died, which argues against abandonment. The county's sale to Marcus hasn't been finalized, which means his possession isn't actually adverse yet. And if the federal survey proves what I suspect, that this land was never legally the county's to sell, his entire case collapses. Maya studied the documents, struggling to parse legal language that seemed designed for obfuscation. What if the survey doesn't go our way? What if this is county land and they can sell it to Marcus? Jack's expression was carefully neutral. Then we argue that you're a subsequent good faith occupant who's made substantial improvements, that evicting a pregnant woman would be unconscionable, that the historical significance of the Robert Wells paintings requires federal protection of the site. We throw everything at the wall and hope something sticks. He paused, then added more gently, but I won't lie to you, without the federal angle, this is an uphill fight. The paintings themselves became both asset and liability. Jack had photographed all 47, documenting their condition and content. He'd contacted an art historian at Portland State University, Dr. Elena Vasquez, who'd nearly dropped the phone when she'd seen the images. Robert Wells had been a minor figure in mid-century American landscape painting, his work competent but not exceptional during his lifetime. But he died before achieving the recognition his later paintings deserved, and his entire mature output had vanished after his death. Art historians had assumed the paintings destroyed or sold privately. Their sudden reappearance represented a significant cultural discovery. De Vasquez arrived in late June, hiking in with equipment that seemed excessive for viewing paintings. Cameras, lights, measuring tools, chemical analysis kits. She spent 2 days examining each canvas, taking notes in handwriting so small Maya needed a magnifying glass to read it. When she finished, her assessment was delivered with academic precision. 46 authenticated Robert Wells paintings from his final period, 1956 and 1962, plus one unsigned work I believe is Catherine Wells's own attempt. Collective value, conservatively estimated at $12 to $15 million. Cultural significance, immeasurable. The number made Maya's head spin. $12 million, hidden beneath a cabin floor for 60 years. Worth killing for if Catherine's suspicions about her father's death were accurate. What happens to them now, she asked. Vasquez considered the question carefully. That depends on legal ownership. If this is county land, the paintings might be considered abandoned property subject to county disposition. If it's federal land, different regulations apply. If Catherine had heirs, they'd have legitimate claims. The legal tangle could take years to resolve. She looked around the cabin at the evidence of Maya's occupation and improvements. But morally, these paintings exist because Catherine protected them, because she refused to let them be commodified and scattered. That legacy matters. Whoever controls their fate should honor her intention. Marcus Hartley's harassment escalated through July. He began appearing at the cabin weekly, always with different tactics. Sometimes he brought county officials, assessors, building inspectors, fire marshals, who'd examine the property and file reports emphasizing its deficiencies. Sometimes he came alone, making offers that started generous and grew increasingly desperate. $5,000 to vacate, $10,000, $20,000. He seemed unable to comprehend that Maya wasn't negotiating, that no amount of money would make her abandon the only home she had. "You're being irrational," Marcus said during one visit, his practiced charm fraying at the edges. "You're 7 months pregnant, living in a cabin without electricity or plumbing, squatting on land you don't own. What kind of mother does that? What kind of mother chooses this over stability?" Maya's response came from a place deeper than reason, from the instinctive certainty that had been growing since she'd first found this cabin. The kind of mother who doesn't let men like you define what stability means. The kind who teaches her daughter that homes are built with determination, not purchased with money. The kind who'd rather raise a child in honest poverty than surrender to comfortable coercion. She rested both hands on her swollen belly, where the baby kicked against her palms as if in agreement. "My daughter will grow up knowing I fought for her. What will yours know about you?" The question landed like a physical blow. Marcus's face cycled through emotions, rage, shame, something that might have been recognition, before settling back into cold calculation. "You'll regret this," he said quietly. "When winter comes, when the baby's born and crying in the cold, when you're alone and desperate, you'll wish you'd taken my offer, but by then it'll be too late." After he left, Maya allowed herself to shake. Tom, who'd been standing silent guard during the confrontation, placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. "He's wrong. You won't be alone. You won't be desperate, and that baby will be warm and safe because we'll make sure of it." He gestured to the cabin, to the improvements they'd made, to the stockpile of firewood stacked against the outer wall. "This place has sheltered women before. It'll shelter you and your daughter. Marcus knows it. That's why he's scared." The federal survey team arrived in early August. 3 men and a woman with equipment that turned the clearing into a temporary surveyor's camp. They worked for a week, taking measurements, comparing current topography to historical maps, arguing in technical jargon about magnetic declination and geodetic datums and coordinate transformations. Jack watched their progress with barely contained anxiety, understanding that everything hinged on their findings. When they finally announced their conclusion, his whoop of triumph echoed through the forest. The cabin sat 52 yards inside federal forest boundaries. The surveying error dated to 1947, when a county clerk had incorrectly transcribed coordinates from a federal land grant. Catherine had paid property taxes on land the county didn't actually own. Marcus's purchase agreement was for land the county couldn't legally sell. The cabin, the clearing, and the acre immediately surrounding it had been federal property for 78 years. Marcus's lawyer appeared the next day, his expensive suit completely inappropriate for the muddy trail. My client disputes the survey's findings. We'll be commissioning an independent verification. Until that's complete, Mr. Hartley's claim remains valid and Ms. Thompson's occupation remains unlawful. He handed Jack a thick envelope. This is formal notice of eviction proceedings. Ms. Thompson has 30 days to vacate the premises. Jack accepted the envelope without opening it. Your client is welcome to dispute federal survey data. While he does, Ms. Thompson will remain in residence under my authority as a Forest Service ranger. This site is under investigation for historical designation. Disturbing it or its occupant would constitute interference with a federal proceeding. He smiled without warmth. Tell Mr. Hartley he's lost. The question now is whether he accepts that gracefully or makes it worse for himself. But Marcus wasn't done. 3 days later, Maya was working in the garden when she heard voices, male, multiple, approaching from the logging road. She straightened, her pregnant belly making the movement awkward, and saw Marcus with 2 other men. Not officials this time. These were younger, harder, dressed in camouflage with rifles slung over their shoulders. Hunters, supposedly, though hunting season wouldn't open for months. Just want to make sure you understand your situation, Marcus called across the clearing, maintaining distance. This area is dangerous. Bears, cougars, sometimes aggressive hikers. A woman alone, pregnant, vulnerable. Accidents happen in the wilderness. No one around to help, no way to call for assistance. You should think about that. The threat was barely veiled. Maya's heart hammered, but she forced her voice steady. I'm not alone. I'm never alone here. As if summoned, Tom emerged from the forest behind the cabin, his bow already strung, an arrow nocked but not drawn. His appearance changed the dynamic instantly. One elderly man against 3 younger ones should have been laughable, but something in Tom's bearing suggested he'd dealt with worse odds and prevailed. Marcus's companions shifted uncomfortably. One muttered something about not signing up for this. Marcus tried to maintain authority. This isn't over. You can't stay here forever. Eventually you'll make a mistake, and when you do, when she does, I'll be here, Tom interrupted, and I'll remember that you threatened a pregnant woman. You understand? I'll remember. He didn't raise his voice, didn't make explicit threats, but the promise carried weight that made even Marcus step backward. After they left, Maya allowed herself to cry, brief, angry tears that she wiped away before they could become sobs. I'm putting you in danger, she told Tom. You and Rose and Lily. Because of me, because I won't leave. You're not putting us anywhere, Tom cut her off. We're choosing to stand with you. Big difference. Catherine was my friend for 15 years. Marcus's harassment killed her. I believe that with everything I am. Maybe I can't prove it in court, but I know. And I won't let him do the same to you. He sat beside her on the garden's edge, his weathered face contemplative. My grandmother used to say that land doesn't belong to people. People belong to land. This place chose Catherine. It chose you. Our job is to honor that choice, whatever it costs. September arrived with cooler nights and the first hints of autumn color in the high-elevation trees. Maya's pregnancy reached its 8th month, her body growing so large that simple tasks required strategic planning. Sleeping was nearly impossible. The baby seemed most active at night, kicking and rolling with enthusiasm that kept Maya awake and uncomfortable. Rose visited daily now, checking for signs of preterm labor, ensuring the baby remained head down, teaching Lily more advanced birth attendant skills just in case. 2 months left, Rose said during one examination, her hands mapping Maya's taut abdomen. Maybe less. First babies often come early. You need everything ready, supplies organized, plans made for different scenarios. Weather will turn soon. Snow could close the trails. You might birth this child with only Lily to help. The possibility terrified Maya more than Marcus's threats ever had. But Rose seemed unconcerned, her confidence in Lily absolute. She's young, but she's been present at 7 births. She knows what to do. Trust her the way I trust her. Rose pressed something into Maya's hand, a small leather pouch containing herbs. Emergency kit. If labor goes wrong, if I can't reach you, these might save your life or the baby's. Pray you never need them. Jack brought news in late September that David had filed custody papers in Seattle. Somehow, probably through Marcus, he'd learned about Maya's pregnancy, about her current situation, about the cabin without electricity or running water. His petition argued that Maya was mentally unstable, living in dangerous conditions, unfit to raise a child. He was requesting full custody at birth, with Maya granted supervised visitation only. Can he do that? Maya asked, the papers trembling in her hands. Can he abandon us, then just take her? He can try, Jack said grimly. Courts generally favor mothers, especially in infancy, but fathers have rights too. His lawyers will argue that conventional stability trumps unconventional competence. They'll present this place as neglect rather than choice. He paused, then added carefully, You'll need to appear in court, probably in December after the birth. You'll need to show the judge that what you've built here is legitimate, that your daughter will be safe and cared for. Can you do that? Maya looked around the cabin at the sturdy repairs, the stocked food shelves, the birthing supplies Rose had accumulated, the garden still producing vegetables despite approaching frost. She thought about Tom's protection, Rose's expertise, Lily's devotion, about the paintings that proved this place had value beyond Marcus's development dreams, about the woman she'd become in these months, so different from the broken person who'd stumbled into the clearing 7 months ago. Yes, she said, I can do that. October brought preparations that felt both practical and sacred. Tom constructed a proper cradle from cedar he'd been seasoning for months, its interior lined with wool Rose had carded and woven. Lily collected soft moss for padding, mountain herbs for blessing, smooth river stones for the baby to hold when old enough. Rose assembled the final birthing supplies, clean towels stacked high, sterilized string for cord cutting, the ceramic bowl polished until it gleamed, herbs and tinctures for every conceivable complication. The cabin itself was readied for winter and birth simultaneously. Tom insulated the walls with moss and mud plaster, installed a better chimney damper, repaired every gap that might let cold air penetrate. Maya organized supplies with obsessive precision, creating zones for different needs. Food here, baby supplies there, medical equipment within arm's reach of where she'd labor. She washed and rewashed the birthing towels, boiled water until the cabin's humidity reached uncomfortable levels, checked and rechecked the list Rose had made. You're ready, Rose pronounced during her final prenatal visit in late October. The baby's dropped. Your body's preparing. Could be 2 weeks, could be 4. But you're ready. She placed both hands on Maya's shoulders, a gesture that was both blessing and promise. I'll come when labor starts. If I can. If I can't, Lily knows what to do. And you, she tapped with Maya's chest firmly, you know what to do. Your body's been building this baby for 9 months. It knows how to birth her too. That night, Maya lay in bed listening to the forest nighttime sounds, her hands resting on her enormous belly where her daughter moved with decreasing frequency. Less room now, compressed and ready. She whispered to her unborn child, Your father doesn't want you. Marcus wants to destroy your home. The law says we're trespassers, but none of that matters. Because you're mine. Because this place is ours. Because we're wanting to fight and we're going to win. You just need to be born first. After that, we'll handle everything together. The first serious storm arrived on November 1st, a wall of clouds that turned afternoon into twilight within minutes. Rain hammered the cabin with intensity that suggested malice, and wind roared through the clearing like something alive and angry. Maya watched from the window as the creek swelled, as trees bent nearly horizontal, as the world outside became a chaos of water and sound. This was weather that could isolate, that could make Rose's arrival impossible, that could force Maya to face labor with only Lily's help. But not yet. Not tonight. Tonight was just a warning, a reminder that winter was coming and bringing challenges that would make Marcus's harassment seem trivial by comparison. Maya built up the fire in the stove, heated water for tea, and settled into the rocking chair Tom had repaired. The baby kicked against her ribs, strong and persistent, and Maya rocked gently, letting the storm's violence become a kind of music. Lily appeared at the door 2 hours into the storm, soaked despite her waterproof jacket, her young face serious with purpose. Grammy sent me. She says this storm is just the first. Says the big ones are coming soon. Says to tell ya, she took a breath, delivering Rose's message with careful precision. Says to tell you that babies come when they come, whether or not, and you should be ready because this one's running out of patience. Maya felt the truth of it in her body, the increasing heaviness, the pressure in her pelvis, the way the baby seemed to be gathering itself for the work ahead. How long until the big storms? She asked. Lily's answer was immediate. Days, maybe a week. Grammy says when the weather breaks this time, it'll break hard. Says you should rest while you can. She moved to stoke the fire, her movements efficient despite her age. I'm staying tonight, Grammy said, in case you need me. They sat together through the storm, Maya rocking slowly and Lily cross-legged on the floor, both of them listening to rain hammer the roof and wind test the cabin's repairs. Around midnight, during a brief lull, they heard something else. The distant sound of an engine, laboring hard, approaching despite impossible conditions. Maya's heart rate spiked. Only one person would be foolish or desperate enough to drive in this weather. Lily moved to the window, peering through darkness, punctuated by lightning. Can't see clearly, but it stopped at the clearing's edge. Engines running, waiting. She turned back to Maya, her young face showing the warrior's readiness Rose had trained into her. He's checking if you're alone, if you're vulnerable. He doesn't know I'm here. Maya's mind raced through possibilities, through fears, through the sudden, sharp certainty that Marcus had decided to act tonight while weather provided cover and isolation. But then the engine revved and retreated, the sound diminishing back down the logging road until silence returned except for storm noise. He'd been checking, testing, preparing, but not acting. Not yet. He'll come back, Maya said quietly, when the next big storm hits. When he thinks I'm at my most vulnerable, he'll come back. Lily nodded, her expression eerily adult. Grammy knows. Grandpa knows. They're ready. When your labor starts, I blow this. She held up the emergency whistle Jack had provided. 3 times. They'll come no matter what. Storm, flood, fire. They'll come. She moved closer, her small hand finding Maya's. And until they do, I'll be here. You won't be alone, not ever. The calendar's notches counted down through November. 14 days remaining, 13, 12. Maya's body changed daily, her ankles swelled despite Rose's diuretic teas. Her back ached constantly, her sleep fragmented into brief dozes between bathroom visits and the baby's restless movements. But she was ready. The cabin was ready. Her community was ready. They'd done everything possible to prepare for the convergence of birth and winter and Marcus's final desperate play. On the morning of the 12th day before Rose's circled date, Maya woke to a different quality of silence. The usual forest sounds were absent. No birds, no squirrels, no distant owl calls. She stood at the window and saw clouds massed on the horizon, darker than any storm she'd witnessed. The air pressure made her ears pop, made her head throb, made her skin prickle with electricity. Lily arrived before breakfast, running hard, breathless with urgency. Grammy says this is it. The big one says it'll hit tonight, maybe last 3 days. Says, she paused to breathe, says if your baby comes during this storm, I'm on my own. Grammy can't cross the creek when it floods that high. Says I need to stay here starting now. Says you need to be ready because babies know when storms come. Says they're connected to weather somehow, and this one's been waiting. Maya felt it in her body, the truth of Rose's prediction. Her daughter had been active all morning, more so than usual, moving with purpose rather than random kicks. Something was different. Something was starting. Something was coming, whether they were ready or not. Tom arrived an hour later with final supplies, extra firewood stacked inside, emergency medical kit from Jack, dried meat that would keep indefinitely. He worked silently, efficiently, preparing the cabin for siege. When he finished, he gripped Maya's shoulders and looked directly into her eyes. Marcus will try something during this storm. I know it. He'll think you're isolated, vulnerable, distracted. But I'll be watching. Storm or not, I'll be watching. He turned to Lily. You know what to do? Yes, Grandpa. All of it? Even the hard parts? Yes. Tom nodded, satisfied. To Maya, he said, this baby chose a hell of a time to make an entrance. But maybe that's appropriate. Maybe she's already a fighter. He smiled, rare and genuine. Catherine would have loved this. Would have loved you. Would have stood right here with us, daring Marcus to try something. He squeezed Maya's shoulders once more, then was gone, disappearing into the gathering gloom. By mid-afternoon, the first drops were falling. Within an hour, the clearing transformed into a shallow lake, water sheeting across saturated ground with nowhere left to drain. Wind built from breeze to gale to something that sounded like freight trains, bending trees that had stood for centuries. Lightning struck so close the cabin's interior flashed white, thunder following instantly with concussion that rattled dishes. Maya and Lily prepared together following protocols Rose had drilled into them. Candles positioned strategical, extra water boiled and cooling in every container, birthing supplies laid out in proper sequence, the ceramic bowl filled with clean water, Tom's knife, gifted for cutting the cord, sterilized and waiting, everything ready for what might come in the next hours or days. "Are you scared?" Maya asked Lily during a moment of relative quiet. The storm's roar reduced momentarily to mere thunder. Lily considered the question with her characteristic seriousness. "A little, but Grammy says fear is just your body getting ready to do hard things. She says you feel it, you breathe through it, and then you do what needs doing anyway." She looked at Maya, her dark eyes reflecting candlelight. "Are you scared?" Maya's hand found her belly, where her daughter moved with decreasing frequency now. Less room, more pressure, everything tightening and preparing. "Terrified," she admitted, "but also ready. Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense," Lily said. "Dear, Grammy says that's when you know you're truly ready. When scared and ready feel like the same thing." They settled in to wait, both of them understanding that the storm outside was only the beginning. Somewhere in its howling chaos, Marcus Hartley was preparing to make his move. And somewhere deep in Maya's body, her daughter was preparing to enter a world that would fight to take her away the moment she arrived. But they were ready, scared and ready, watching the storm, waiting for battle, knowing that everything they'd built over these 7 months, every friendship, every skill, every moment of preparation, was about to be tested. The baby kicked once, hard and purposeful, as if to say, "Let's do this." And in the distance, barely audible over the storm, came the grinding roar of an engine pushed far beyond reason, approaching through impossible conditions, bringing confrontation they'd known was inevitable. The storm had arrived. So had the moment of truth. The 14th notch on the calendar marked 2 weeks until the date Rose had circled in red. Maya's body had transformed beyond recognition in these final days, her belly impossibly tight, sitting so low that walking required a waddle she'd once found comical in other pregnant women. Now she understood the mechanics of it, the way the baby's head pressed against her pelvis with each step, sending shooting pains down her inner thighs. Sleep had become a memory. She dozed in 20-minute increments between bathroom visits, between the baby's relentless gymnastics, between the anxious spirals of wondering if she was truly ready for what was coming. Rose's daily visits had taken on new urgency. Each morning she'd check cervical dilation with clinical efficiency, nodding at the changes she found. Your body opens itself, prepares the path. 2 centimeters now. When you reach 10, the baby comes through. She'd press her experienced fingers along Maya's abdomen, mapping the infant's position with touches that felt like communication between the midwife and the child. Head down, locked into place. Good. The baby knows its work. The supplies Rose had accumulated over weeks now filled an entire corner of the cabin. Stacks of clean towels boiled and dried repeatedly until they were sterile enough for surgery. Glass jars of herbs labeled in Rose's precise handwriting. Some for pain, some for bleeding, some for infection, some for milk production. A length of fishing line that had been sterilized in alcohol sharper than any commercial suture. The ceramic bowl that had witnessed its 5 generations of birth sat empty and waiting, polished until it reflected candlelight like a mirror. Lily had helped arrange everything according to a diagram Rose drew, creating zones for different stages of labor. The sight of it all made Maya's heart race with equal parts terror and determination. Tom appeared on the 12th day with a gift wrapped in soft leather. Inside was a knife, its blade honed to an edge so fine it could slice paper by weight alone. The handle bore carvings of protective symbols Maya didn't recognize, but felt comforted by nonetheless. For cutting the cord, he explained simply. And for defense, if needed. Marcus has been quiet too long. That worries me more than his threats ever did. The observation lodged in Maya's chest like a splinter. Marcus hadn't been seen since Jack had documented his attempted theft of the paintings, since Tom's arrow had sent him limping to the hospital with explanations he couldn't make without incriminating himself. But quiet didn't mean defeated. Men like Marcus didn't surrender. They regrouped, planned, waited for optimal moments to strike. Maya was vulnerable now, enormous and slow, her body committed to biological imperatives that wouldn't pause for external threats. If Marcus understood timing, and his lifetime of ruthless calculation suggested he did, he'd know this was his window. Lily had moved into the cabin 3 days ago, her small bedroll positioned near the stove where she could respond instantly if Maya needed help during the night. The girl's presence steadied Maya in ways she couldn't articulate. At 11 years old, Lily possessed a competence that shamed many adults. She kept the fire fed without being asked, maintained the water supply, prepared simple meals when Maya was too exhausted to stand over the stove. More than that, she talked. Stories about school, about the forest, about Catherine. The steady stream of words created a soundtrack that kept Maya's anxious thoughts from achieving critical mass. Grammy says first babies come when they're ready, not when the calendar says. Lily mentioned it on the morning of the 13th day, stirring oatmeal at the stove while Maya sat propped against pillows trying to find a position that didn't make her ribs scream. She says babies listen to the moon more than clocks. The full moon is tonight. She thinks that's when your daughter will decide. Maya placed both hands on her belly, feeling the rhythmic kicks that had become her daughter's language. You hear that? Lily says you're supposed to wait for the moon. Can you manage that? The baby responded with what felt like a roll, the entire shape of Maya's abdomen shifting as the infant repositioned. Rose had explained that this restlessness was normal in the days before labor, the baby finding its final position, gathering itself for the work ahead. The afternoon brought clouds, heavy and dark, rolling over the mountain ridges with the kind of purposeful momentum that suggested significance. Lily stood at the window, reading the sky with inherited knowledge. Big storm, bigger than the ones before. Grammy won't be able to cross the creek if it floods. She turned to Maya, her young face serious. She made me practice everything again yesterday. Just in case. The implication hung between them. Just in case Maya went into labor during the storm. Just in case an 11-year-old child had to guide a woman through childbirth with only theoretical knowledge and fierce determination. Maya wanted to protest, to insist they had more time, to demand that the universe not be quite so theatrical about the timing. But her body had its own intelligence, and as afternoon faded toward evening, she felt the first real contraction. Not the practiced tightenings she'd experienced for weeks, but something unmistakable in its purpose. A wave that started in her lower back and wrapped around her entire torso, squeezing with enough force to steal her breath. Lily saw her face change. Was that one? Maya waited for the contraction to release before answering. Yes, real one. She checked the clock Tom had repaired, its ticking suddenly loud in the cabin's quiet. Time it. Rose said we need to know when they start coming close together. Thunder rolled across the valley as the first drops hit the roof. Within minutes, the rain intensified from sprinkle to deluge, each drop hitting the cabin with percussion that built into a roar. Lily grabbed the emergency radio Jack had installed, keying the microphone with practiced efficiency. Grammy, the baby is coming. Maya had a real contraction. Can you hear me? Static answered. She tried again, adjusting frequencies, but the storm had swallowed their signal. They were alone. For the next hour, contractions came at irregular intervals, 18 minutes, then 12, then 20, then 10. Maya tried to track them, but the pain made mathematics difficult. Each wave demanded total attention, required her to breathe in specific patterns Rose had taught, forced her to focus on relaxing muscles that wanted instinctively to tense. Between contractions, she was lucid, almost herself. During them, she existed in a different state entirely, primal and ancient, connected to every woman who'd ever labored. Lily moved through the cabin with surprising calm, lighting candles as darkness fell, heating water on the stove, pulling out the supplies in the order Rose had specified. She talked constantly, a running commentary that Maya clung to like a rope in churning water. Grammy says the pain is your body working, doing what it needs to do. She says you don't fight it, you ride it like a wave. She says women have been doing this since forever, and your body remembers even if your mind doesn't. Around 8 o'clock, the contractions shifted. They came faster now, 8 minutes apart, then 6, each one lasting longer, gripping harder. Maya found herself making sounds she'd never heard herself produce. Low groans that helped somehow, gave the pain somewhere to go besides inward. Lily timed them with the stopwatch Jack had provided, marking each one in a notebook, calculating averages with the seriousness of a scientist recording critical data. 6 minutes apart, Lily announced after the latest contraction passed. And they're getting stronger, right? Grammy said when they're 5 minutes apart and lasting a minute, we're getting close. She helped Maya stand, guided her to walk around the cabin's interior. Movement helps. Grammy says gravity is your friend. They paced together, Lily's small hand gripping Maya's elbow for support, both of them pausing when contractions hit. Maya would lean against the wall, breathing through the peak, feeling the inexorable pressure building. Her water hadn't broken yet, but she could feel something changing deep in her pelvis, a sense of the baby descending, preparing, time lost meaning. Existence narrowed to the cycle of contraction and rest, pain and relief, fear and determination cycling endlessly. The sound that cut through the storm wasn't thunder. It was an engine laboring hard, the grinding roar of a vehicle being pushed beyond reasonable limits in impossible conditions. Lily froze mid-step, her eyes going wide. Maya's contraction chose that moment to hit, doubling her over, making response impossible. Through the pain, she heard the engine cut, heard a door slam, heard footsteps splashing through the flooding clearing. Not Tom's measured tread, not Rose's purposeful stride, someone else. Maya knew before Lily confirmed it, knew it in the way her body's terror competed with the labor's momentum, knew it in the sick certainty that Marcus Hartley's timing was, as always, impeccable. He's going around back, Lily whispered, pressed to the window, to the cedar tree entrance, the underground room. Her hand found the emergency whistle hanging by the door, and she blew 3 sharp blasts that pierced even the storm's roar. If Tom and Rose were anywhere close, they'd hear. If they weren't, another contraction seized Maya, stronger than any before. This one brought the unmistakable urge to push, the biological imperative that wouldn't be denied. Her water broke in a warm gush that soaked through her clothing, and suddenly everything was urgent, immediate, happening. Lily rushed to her side, helping her down to the prepared birthing area, spreading clean towels beneath her. "I need to check how far you've opened," the girl said, her voice shaking slightly, but her hands steady. She'd watched Rose do this dozens of times, had practiced on diagrams. Now theory became necessity. Below them, through the floorboards, came the sound of the underground door being forced. Marcus had found the second entrance, the one Lily had mentioned months ago. He was down there right now among the paintings, probably photographing them, documenting his claim before trying to physically remove them. Maya wanted to care, wanted to stop him, but her body had made its choice. The baby was coming now, in the next hour, maybe the next minutes, and nothing else mattered beyond that fundamental truth. Lily's small fingers checked dilation with surprising competence. "I can feel the head. You're all the way open." Grammy said, "When I can feel the baby and you want to push, we push." She positioned herself at Maya's feet, ready to catch an infant, a child preparing to deliver a child. The absurdity would have been laughable under any other circumstances. Now it was simply reality. Maya bore down with the next contraction, pushing with every muscle, feeling her daughter move through her body in a way that was both agony and purpose. Lily's young face showed intense concentration, her hands ready, Rose's training focused into this moment. The cabin shook with thunder, or perhaps that was just how the world felt when you were giving birth while someone burgled your home, when you were trusting an 11-year-old to catch your daughter, when every certainty you'd ever held about how life should work had been shredded and remade. The door burst open, not Marcus emerging from below, but Tom crashing through the main entrance, soaked to the skin, his bow in hand and murder in his eyes. He took in the scene instantly. Maya in active labor, Lily positioned to catch the baby, the sounds from the underground room. Without a word, he moved to the floor opening and descended, moving with speed that belied his age. Maya heard shouting, heard Marcus's protests, heard Tom's response too low to make out words. Then came a scream, sharp and shocked, and Tom reappeared half-dragging Marcus Hartley, who clutched his thigh where an arrow protruded at an angle calculated to disable without killing. "Walk out," Tom commanded, his voice carrying an authority that made even Marcus's entitlement crumble. "Drive away. If I see you on this land again, the next arrow goes through something you can't live without." Marcus stumbled toward the door, his face contorted with pain and rage. "Those paintings are not yours," Tom finished. "Will never be yours. Your father killed for them and failed. You've harassed, threatened, and stolen for them and failed. You're done." He physically shoved Marcus out into the storm, closed the door, turned back to where Maya labored. Another contraction hit, harder than any before. Maya pushed with everything she had, feeling the baby's head crown, feeling the burning stretch that Rose had promised meant progress. Lily's small hands supported the emerging head, checking for cord entanglement exactly as she'd been taught. "No cord," she announced, her voice high with stress but steady in execution. "Push again when you need to." Tom moved to the stove, heating water, preparing the knife he'd given Maya for its intended purpose, becoming another set of hands in the choreography of birth. The next contraction brought the baby's shoulders, then in a rush, the entire small body slipping out into Lily's waiting hands. For one breathless moment, the cabin held silence except for the storm. Then the baby girl drew her first breath and released it in an indignant cry that announced her arrival to the world she'd just entered. Lily lifted the infant to Maya's chest, tears streaming down her face. "You did it. She's here." The baby's skin was vernix covered and blood-streaked, her dark hair plastered to a perfectly formed skull, her eyes squinting against light she'd never known. Maya's hands closed around her daughter, feeling the rapid heartbeat, the warmth of new life, the impossible reality of the separate person who'd just been part of her. Tom checked the umbilical cord, waiting for it to stop pulsing before using his knife to cut it, tying it off with sterilized string. The afterbirth followed minutes later, intact and healthy. Lily checked it carefully against the diagrams Rose had made her memorize, ensuring nothing remained inside that could cause infection. Through it all, Maya held her daughter, whispering words of welcome, promises she intended to keep with every cell of her body. When Rose finally arrived 90 minutes later, wading through floodwaters that had delayed her, she found mother and baby already bonded, already a unit unto themselves. Her examination was thorough but brief. Both were healthy. The birth had been textbook despite its dramatic circumstances. She looked at Lily with an expression Maya had never seen on the stern woman's face. Pride mixed with something like awe. "You did medicine today, granddaughter. Real medicine. What you accomplished tonight, most adults couldn't manage." Maya named her daughter by candlelight, with Tom and Rose and Lily gathered close. Catherine, for the woman whose cabin had sheltered them. Lily, for the girl who'd brought her into the world. Catherine Lily Thompson. Katie. The baby nursed with instinctive certainty, and Maya felt the last pieces of her old self transform completely. She was a mother now. Whatever came next, whoever tried to take this child, they'd face someone who'd given birth during a storm while her home was under attack and emerged victorious. Lesser threats would be nothing by comparison. The morning after Katie's birth brought David. The sound of his rental car struggling through the muddy road announced him before Maya saw him. She was nursing Katie when he burst through the door, his architect's precision destroyed by sleeplessness and what appeared to be genuine panic. He stopped when he saw them, mother and infant, in the pale morning light, and for a long moment couldn't speak. "I heard the baby came," he finally managed. "That there were complications, that you were alone." His hands ran through his hair repeatedly. "I thought you might die, that my daughter might die, and I realized." He stopped himself, seemed to forcibly gather control. "I need to see her, to know she's okay." Maya's first instinct was refusal. But something in David's face looked genuinely broken, and she remembered that whatever else had happened, they'd once loved each other. "Briefly," she said, her voice harder than she'd ever heard it, But understand this, she's mine. Not ours, mine. You gave up all rights when you left. David approached slowly, cautiously, as if she might bolt. When Maya transferred Katie to his arms, she watched his face transform, the calculation that had driven his custody claim dissolving into something raw. He held his daughter for exactly 5 minutes before his phone rang, startling the baby into crying. David tried to juggle both soothing her and reaching for his phone, failing at both, until Maya reclaimed Katie and settled her against her shoulder. David stepped outside to take the call. His voice drifted back through the open door. He was talking to his lawyer. Maya heard him say, "No, I've seen them both. They're not just fine, I can't do this, withdraw the petition, today. All of it." A pause. "Because she's a better mother than I would ever be a father. Because Katie deserves the woman who fought for her, not the man who ran away." When he returned inside, his shoulders had lost their defensive set. "I'm dropping everything. Full custody to you, no visitation requirements, no strings. I'll set up child support because that's my financial responsibility, but I won't interfere otherwise." He looked around the cabin with new eyes. "You've built something here that I don't understand, but I can see it's real. Katie will grow up knowing her mother loved her enough to fight impossible battles. That's more than most kids get." After David left, Rose returned for a post-birth check. She examined both Maya and Katie with careful attention, nodding approval at what she found. "The dangerous time has passed. Now comes the long work, months and years, not hours. Your body will heal, the baby will grow. You'll both be different people in a year than you are today." She handed Maya more herbs for milk production. "Feed yourself well, the baby takes from you now, and you must replenish constantly." Jack arrived 3 days post-birth with news that changed everything. The federal survey was complete. The cabin sat on land that had been mistakenly deeded to the county in 1947 during a clerical error. Neither Catherine nor Marcus had ever legally owned it. The property belonged to the federal government. Marcus's entire claim had evaporated overnight. The county couldn't sell what it had never legitimately possessed. But this created a complication for Maya. She was now confirmed as squatting on federal land. Jack's conservation easement application offered a solution. She could stay as resident manager, studying and protecting the area's ecological and historical resources. The position came with a modest stipend, official recognition, legal immunity for past trespass. It requires approval from Washington, which will take months, Jack explained. "But I've already submitted the paperwork. The Robert Wells paintings are strong leverage, cultural heritage that needs protecting. You're the obvious choice for steward." The custody hearing, originally scheduled for December 1st, was rescheduled at David's request. His lawyer filed withdrawal papers, but Judge Helen Rodriguez wanted a formal hearing anyway to ensure the settlement served the child's best interests. She agreed to hold it at the cabin, an unusual accommodation, but Jack had argued persuasively that the property needed to be evaluated in context. A temporary courtroom was established on the cabin's wide porch, with folding chairs for witnesses and recording equipment Jack provided. Judge Rodriguez arrived on a gray November morning, looking skeptical of the entire arrangement. She was 62, weathered from outdoor hobbies, and her eyes missed nothing as she surveyed the clearing. Tom had spent 2 days preparing, clearing brush, repairing the porch railing, making the property look its best. The cabin gleamed from Maya's obsessive cleaning, the garden showed careful tending despite the season, and Katie slept peacefully in the cradle by the door. David arrived with his lawyer, both severely uncomfortable in the wilderness setting. The lawyer tried to establish that David's withdrawal came from rational assessment rather than coercion, that he genuinely believed Maya was the better parent. Tom testified about Catherine's 15 years of successful wilderness living, about Maya's transformation from lost refugee to capable homesteader. Rose testified about the successful birth, Katie's excellent health, Maya's competence under impossible pressure. Jack presented the conservation position offer, the historical significance of the Robert Wells paintings, the federal designation that would make the cabin Maya's legal residence. He showed photographs of the paintings now secured in federal custody, awaiting transfer to the Portland Art Museum. $14.2 million of American art preserved because Maya had refused to abandon Catherine's legacy. When Maya took the stand, Judge Rodriguez's first question was direct. Ms. Thompson, do you understand that raising a child in isolation, without conventional support systems, places significant responsibility on you? Maya looked at Katie, asleep in Rose's arms, then met the judge's eyes. Your Honor, I understand that better than anyone. But isolation and solitude aren't the same thing. I'm not alone. I have Tom and Rose and Lily, who've become my family. I have Jack's professional support. I have meaningful work protecting this land and its history. What I don't have is electricity, running water, or proximity to hospitals. But my daughter has clean air, clean water, food I grow myself, and caregivers who love her. She'll learn practical skills most children never experience. She'll understand that strength comes from facing challenges, not from avoiding them. That's not minimum care. That's the foundation for the kind of person I want her to become. David's lawyer attempted to argue that Maya's choices, however admirable, shouldn't limit Katie's access to conventional education and healthcare. Judge Rodriguez cut her off. Mr. Thompson has withdrawn his petition. My role now is only to ensure that withdrawal serves the child's interests. From what I've observed, it does. She glanced at David. Mr. Thompson, do you wish to request visitation rights? David looked at Katie, then at Maya, then shook his head. No, Your Honor. I think Katie needs consistency, needs to know who her family is. I'll contribute financially, but Maya should make all decisions about Katie's upbringing. Judge Rodriguez made notes, then looked up. This court approves the custody arrangement as proposed. Maya Thompson receives full custody with no visitation requirements. David Thompson is responsible for child support per state guidelines. Ms. Thompson must maintain medical documentation of the child's health and provide quarterly updates to child services for the next 2 years. After that period, if no concerns have been raised, the oversight requirement will be lifted. She closed her folder. Ms. Thompson, you've demonstrated remarkable capability under extraordinary circumstances. I wish you and your daughter well. The week following the hearing brought Marcus's lawyer with a settlement offer. Marcus would drop all property claims and issue a public apology in exchange for first right of refusal if the paintings were ever sold privately. Maya's response was immediate and final. The paintings are going to the Portland Art Museum as a permanent collection. They'll never be sold. Marcus gets nothing except the knowledge that he failed where his father failed. That's the only settlement he'll receive from me. Tom and Jack delivered the message together. They returned an hour later reporting that Marcus had accepted, not gracefully, but definitively. His reputation was ruined in the county anyway. His harassment of Catherine now public knowledge. His attempted theft during Maya's labor seen as particularly despicable. He moved his development operations to different land and disappeared from their lives. Winter descended fully by mid-December. Snow blanketed the clearing, transforming it into something from a fairy tale. Maya kept the cabin warm, kept Katie fed and growing, learned the rhythms of motherhood that Rose had promised would become instinctive. Lily visited when weather permitted, always bringing gifts, a carved rattle from Tom, herbs from Rose, hand-sewn baby clothes she'd made in school. On Christmas Eve, the cabin filled with celebration. Tom and Rose and Lily brought a feast. Jack arrived with a portable generator and LED lights that turned the clearing magical. They passed Katie from arms to arms, each person speaking blessings. Tom promised protection. Rose promised healing knowledge. Lily promised sisterhood. Jack promised that he'd ensure Katie always had a place in these mountains. Maya held her daughter close, looking at the faces illuminated by electric light and firelight combined. A year ago, she'd been in Seattle, pregnant and abandoned. 6 months ago, she'd been terrified and alone. Now she sat surrounded by family, not given by blood, but chosen through shared struggle. The transformation felt impossible until she remembered the truth she'd learned. The impossible just meant no one had managed it yet. Spring came eventually, melting snow to reveal garden beds waiting for seeds. Katie grew from newborn to infant, her personality emerging, alert, curious, quick to smile. The conservation position was approved in March, making Maya an official federal employee with salary and benefits. The paintings were formally transferred to the Portland Art Museum, where they'd remain accessible to everyone, rather than hidden or sold to private collectors. The cabin that had once been abandoned became a small historical site. A few tourists came each month, wanting to see where Robert Wells' daughter had lived, where his paintings had been preserved for 60 years. Maya created brief tours, showing photographs and telling Catherine's story. Most visitors were respectful, awed by the narrative. She charged nothing but accepted donations for a scholarship fund, honoring Catherine and supporting women in wilderness conservation. On the anniversary of Katie's birth, Maya stood on the porch with her daughter in her arms. The clearing looked peaceful under winter sun, smoke curling from the chimney, the garden marked with stakes showing where spring planting would go. She thought about the woman she'd been when she'd stumbled into this clearing 18 months ago, desperate, lost, certain she was running toward oblivion. She'd been running toward exactly this, toward Katie's existence, toward the family she'd built from strangers, toward work that mattered, toward the truth that the wilderness hadn't broken her because she'd refused to stay broken. She whispered to her daughter, "You'll grow up knowing that homes can be built from ruins, that families can be chosen, that the people who look most lost are sometimes finding their way toward the only destination that ever mattered." Katie made a sound that wasn't quite a word, reaching for a bird that landed nearby. The bird flew away, and Katie's face showed brief disappointment before something else caught her attention. So resilient, so present, so utterly herself. Maya kissed her daughter's dark hair and felt gratitude for every impossible thing that had led to this moment. Standing in a cabin she'd claimed, holding a daughter she'd fought for, surrounded by mountains that had shown her what she was made of. Not fragility or failure, but survival and stubbornness and love fierce enough to transform wreckage into foundation. The sun set behind the ridge, painting the sky in colors that would have made Robert Wells reach for his brushes. Catherine's unsigned painting of this cabin had tried to capture these hues and nearly succeeded. Maya wondered if Catherine had stood here understanding she'd found sanctuary rather than exile. Probably. The cabin had always offered shelter to women the world had discarded, and those women had repaid it by refusing to be discarded, by transforming survival into flourishing, by proving that sometimes running into wilderness isn't escape. It's the journey toward becoming who you were always meant to be.